Hi y'all, Mike Peace Woodturning. Welcome back to my shop. If I got a great beginner's project for you today, we're going to turn a flower resembles a tulip, and it makes a great complement to a vase you're going to turn. If you want to see how we do this, keep watching. So this is going to take a block of wood 2 inches square by about 2.5 inches long, or 50 millimeter by about 63 millimeter. You want to get as square as possible and mark it and put it between centers. Then we're going to turn it around and add a chuck tenon. So we're going to turn this between centers at pretty reasonable speed. Get up to somewhere maybe 16, 1800, 2000. We're going to use a spindle roughing gouge. That's that large C shape, which is the optimal tool for turning a square to round. I'm at 1800, I can go a little faster. Let me point out, I see an awful lot of beginners start this project and they just start poking this in without any awareness of the alignment. So you want to always anchor the tool, ride the bevel, that means let it rub back here on the back side, and then slowly lift the handle till it cuts, so you don't wind up getting this big ugly looking scraping chips, but you're going to get nice curling shavings. Anchor the tool, ride the bevel, lift till it cuts, and move in the direction of cut and slide incline. And now I'm going to add a tenon. Now be sure to make the tenon appropriate for your chuck jaws, and the jaws that I'm going to use require a parallel tenon, not a dovetail. Don't use a dovetail where it calls for parallel. And we're going to drill a hole down here. Before we do though, we want to face this off. Maybe you got it perfectly square, but maybe it's off just a little bit. So take your spindle gouge, 1/2 inch, maybe a smaller bowl gouge, and just with the flute pointed, maybe at 10 o'clock, just pull it back and forth. Until you get it nice and trued up. When I put in my drill chuck, I go ahead and crank out the quill to about 1 inch so I know it's going to seat, and then I just kind of give it a good pop. And I set it at 1 inch because I use these gradations on the quill. I'm going to drill this hole 1.5 inches deep, and that way I just know if I start at 1, I go to 2.5. So I bring it up. Slow the speed down a little bit. Not going to be doing this at more than about 500. And then I just slowly crank it in. Okay, so that tells me I need to increase the torque for this drilling operation. So let me change the belt speed. So I now change the belt setting to low speed, high torque. Chips, yeah. 2 1/8, 2 1/4, 2 3/8, 2 1/2. Now mark a line 1 inch from the end, and another line 1.5 inches from the end. Now I'm going to mark for the petals. Now I'm going to put 4 petals on this. The easiest way I find is to just line up and mark the center between the chuck jaws. They don't have to be perfect. And then I turn it 90 degrees. I'm actually getting ahead of myself doing this marking. I need to thin these walls down first on the outside, shape this. So first thing I'm going to do is mark where the bottom is going to be. And I need to change the torque setting back to a higher range on my lathe. Let me do that. Okay, I've got the belt set again. First thing I'm going to do is make a parting cut to make it easier for my eye to know where the bottom of this is going to be. I get the speed up a little over 1,000. Come in here with a parting tool. This is oak, so it's pretty tough wood. Now that gives me two things. Number one, when I shape the bottom, it gives me a stopgap. When I come around, if I slip, I'm more likely to fall into that slot and not hit the chuck jaw, so that's a good thing. So anchor the tool, lift and ride the bevel, lift until it cuts. And that gives me a start. Now I'm going to shape toward this end. Given the rule of thirds, the fattest area is going to be about 1/3 from the bottom. Using a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. Okay, once we get over the line here, bring it all around. Okay, now I've got that shape. Now I'm going to remark it again. Okay, now I'm going to mark the between each petal, and I'm going to do that by lining up the gap here on the chuck, and do this by eye. Just come in like this, and actually I'm going to draw it all the way down to the bottom of here. There's the top. Get the next one up, draw a line right down here, and the next one, and the next one. Okay, now I'm going to mark the petals. I'm going to mark the petal about 1/4 of an inch from each side of center. I'm just going to eyeball that. And then I'm going to kind of slightly curve it around where that cut's going to be, down to the 1-inch line. And eyeball is close enough, but I do want to kind of mark the starting point. Okay, now I can cut those petals out. Banjo out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to use a coping saw, and I'm just going to come in here, follow that line, and I'm just going to do all 8 cuts. I could probably try to do 2 at a time, but I find that a bit challenging, so let's just do it this way. Let's start that cut. There we go. Now let's do the next one. And let's come back on this one. And there we go. Now I'm going to cut a center line down to this next line, perpendicular. And that's going to help us sand. That's going to help us sand. Okay. Alright, now let me show you another technique with a brand new tool I got. If you don't see this next scene, it's because I got blood on the wood, and I'm not going to use this tool anymore. But this is a pretty scary accessory tool I got off Amazon. I bought. I'll have a link to it if I don't get blood on the wood, because it is a pretty scary looking tool. I think I'm going to try to use a spindle lock to kind of hold this in place. And now I'm going to use both hands to control that cut. That's what I'm talking about. Very grabby. Let's see what speed I'm at. I'm at the lowest speed. Maybe it'd be less grabby if I go faster. I don't know. This is a pretty scary tool. Okay, let's see. Alright, I'll turn the speed up to medium, see if it's easier or not. Good thing it's pulling away from me, not for me. Once it's in there, it wants to come around and do things. I'm not sure that I could recommend this solution for this particular cutting application, maybe for something else. So I set my rotary tool aside and back to the coping saw. Okay, and I'll cut out the last one off camera. Let me demonstrate how I'm going to sand this, and then I will turn on my dust collection, put on my respirator, and finish the sanding. So for the outside, I'm going to use an inertia sander. That's the approach I'd use for that. I could also do just use paper with my hand on the fat portion, and being careful with the tips. Now for the inside, that's the trick, and I would use a cloth-backed abrasive, and you can come in there and again lock the spindle down. And you could do one side at a time, or you could do, actually you can come down and do two petals at a time. Bring them in at an angle. And I'll finish the sanding off camera. A couple more sanding tips. You want to keep this edge right here as sharp as possible, so don't round that over. At least that's my recommendation for looks. Now the other technique you can use, you can buy these custom sanding sticks, and that works great for keeping a nice crisp edge. You can certainly make your own with strips of wood and glue on some adhesive. One other sanding tip: don't ever put your finger inside this because it'll chew it up. Make you a cone of sandpaper wrapped in this direction, and then you can put this in and get that inside. If your paper doesn't have this stiff a back, you can always wrap around it a cone of wood. Now before we part it off, we're going to drill a through hole to put the stem on. I'm using a 1/8 inch dowel or bamboo skewer for the stem. We've got a divot in the bottom, so we just need to find that divot, and I can tell I can just barely get through that area I need. So let's put it in there. I don't know where you can see it. Let's clear chips. Let's see how far that got us. Not quite through. Almost need to. I can go down a little bit further here with this drill before I start rubbing on the petals. Okay. Now we can finish parting this off. And I'm going to use detail spindle gouge to get in there since I'm going deep. Got that little bitty hole, so I've got to be mindful of that. I think I'm going to go ahead and use another tool. I have this tiny parting tool with it comes down to a point. I've got this in another video, call it a shear spear, and it's great for getting in fine spaces like that. Now let's see if I can keep from chasing this around the shop floor. There we go. Here's one with a turned open shape, a little bit different, and the petals come out as opposed to closing in on like a tulip. Now let me show you an alternative way to do this. might be easier for you, might be more difficult, but it's an alternative way. But you drill the hole with the drill press, and then we're going to cut these slots, petals on a bandsaw. So make sure you got everything locked down. I've got notches here to grasp it in these this clamp, and we're going to go down. I'm using a 3/4 inch bit this time. As before, I mark those V cut, and I'm only going to do it on 2 adjacent sides, because we're going to cut through and do 2 notches and flip it over and do 2 notches. If you're doing a lot of these, one approach is make you a little template like this, in which you can mark those petals. I just took a craft stick and shaped it quickly with a pocket knife, and you just line up the 1 inch line with a point there, and then draw your curves on both sides, and that's quick and easy. So with it firmly clamped in a hand block, now we're going to cut those V's on the bandsaw. So I've turned the mandrel to match the drill bit I used, which in this case was 3/4, but if I had to do it over again, I'd make it probably one inch. And then this fits over, and if it's a little loose, you can use a piece of masking tape. So now we're going to drill a hole to bring up the tailstock, and I'm going to do that with my, again, 1 inch bit, but I think before that I will take a skew and mark centers, because it may be different from what's marked here. Okay, I think that'll do it. So we're just going to come right in and drill that 1 inch. This matches the dowel I'm going to be using for a stem. Now we can bring up tailstock support using the cone center. And now we do the entire operation on the outside. We don't do any work on the inside. So again, I'm just going to use a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. And we're going to shape this thing around on the back side, then on the front side. And probably I should go ahead and rough it round. We'll rough it round using a spindle roughing gouge. Now I'll switch to the spindle gouge, 3/8 inch. And we'll sand like we did before. Let me show you what it looks like. Not quite as refined looking, but if we'd used a 1 inch drill bit, it would have certainly been the walls of the petals wouldn't have been as thick. Of course, you can always refine the inside of that second method by using a Dremel with a sanding drum to kind of clean up. I'm going to dye these, but before I do that, I'm going to bleach them. I'm not going to go into the details of the bleaching other than to mention a previous video in which I showed how to make this DIY bleaching solution out of some pool stuff and a lye mixture. Be careful with the bleach. Let me give you some idea of the effectiveness of the bleach. This is some ambrosia maple. It's fairly old, and there's the contrast when I put one coat of bleach on it. Here's the original, here's the bleach. Here's a piece of mahogany, original color, a couple of coats of bleach. Here's some holly, dark, with the bleach. And then for these projects, you can see I've gotten several items here. A couple of flowers, oak, Bradford pear, I think that one's maple, and a couple of pieces of fruit. So you can see it really bleaches them out well. Okay, let's put it all together with our finishing touches. First, let me show you dramatically the difference between just applying yellow dye over plain wood and applying it over bleached wood. The bleached wood really pops. Now, you can add stems to these. I like to wipe them down with a little green dye. You can either buy dowels. You can get them in 1/8 inch and 3/32 of an inch from your hobby shop, a few other places, but the cheapest way is to buy bamboo skewers. You know, they're very inexpensive. You can get them at Dollar Tree, Walmart, whatever. The other thing that you can add to really touch it up a little bit is that if you add a couple of blades of grass, just get you a thin slat of wood, cut it out on your bandsaw, shape it a little bit, refine the edges, maybe cut a little decorative groove in it is shown here. If you make them too short, you're going to find out you're going to have to glue something to make them taller for the vase. So start off with a longer piece of wood to make that blade of grass, and that really adds a little extra finishing touch. Another technique is when you glue the stem in, you can fray the ends with a pocket knife or a skew for an increased decoration. I organize all my videos in playlists, and I'm going to put this one in my playlist on beginner projects. So if you want to see the beginner project, you might want to click on that link above. If you missed the video on cattails that I made recently, there's another way to decorate, to make something to put inside a vase you turned. If you like this video, please click the like button. It helps the YouTube algorithm push it out to other wood turners. I welcome your comments, and I read every one of them, so please leave a comment below. And remember, y'all stay safe and come on back, you hear?